Well kids, Halloween time is finally here. Seeing as I'm too old to experience joy anymore, much less do something like go trick-or-treating, I decided that it would be fun to watch every single Halloween-themed South Park episode and to rank them all in this video. Also, you've got to keep in mind that this video is coming out on Halloween of 2021, so if there have been any Halloween specials since then that aren't in this video, that's why. I can't see into the future. Also, this video is going to be official Halloween episodes only. No episodes that happen to come out around October and have spooky movie tropes. So no Night of the Living Homeless and no dead celebrities. With that established, we open up the list to KORN'S Groovy Pirate Ghost Mystery. This isn't a bad episode, it's just the worst Halloween episode. And I think it comes mostly down to the source material they're parodying with this episode. You see, this episode is a parody of the original production Hanna-Barbera Scooby-Doo cartoons. See, the old Scooby-Doo cartoons had a real habit of taking a situation that tonally should be, like, scary and just generally unpleasant, and taking those situations and making them just kind of boring. To South Park's credit, in the moments in this episode where that happens, they fill those in with jokes, so that makes it worthwhile to me. To be completely honest, I like the direction the episode seems to be going in the first half. This episode's plot kicks off with the boys being scared by the 6th graders, or at this point in the series, they're still the 5th graders. So the boys vow to get revenge on the 5th graders by scaring them. How do they go about scaring them, you ask? Well, they dig up Kyle's recently deceased grandma, of course. I can definitely see why the scenes of the two cemetery workers going around describing necrophilia in all its horrid, grotesque detail can wear thin for people, but on the other hand, come on, it's pretty fucking funny. Granted, KORN being portrayed as the Mystery Inc. type characters is a pretty funny concept. And let's be honest, there's really not a whole lot much more an episode like this can do plot-wise. In the end, I think it just comes down to how much you appreciate homages to the original Scooby-Doo. If you're like me and was never really super into Scooby-Doo, this episode's still a bit better than Forced Castration. I get the feeling if I were more into it, I would get much more of a kick out of this episode. It would also probably help to be a KORN fan. Which, by the way, I don't know what to say about KORN being in this episode. I love how they're written as campy Saturday morning cartoon heroes. On the other hand, these guys are not voice actors. Those who are sticklers for natural-sounding line delivery might have choice words to say about their performance. Myself, I think the members of KORN phoning it in just adds to the comedy of the episode. I guess it's also kinda neat to see Father Maxie in an antagonistic role, I guess. His tirade about rock and roll being the devil's music really reminds me of Moral Oral. Now, some of you might be surprised to learn that I put Season 2's Halloween special, SPOOKYFISH, above Season 3's Halloween special. Basically, for the uninitiated, throughout the production of South Park Season 2, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of the show, weren't as involved with this season as much as they were every other season. Therefore, I personally view Season 2 as South Park's weakest season to date. Despite this, I gotta say, I just like SPOOKYFISH more than KORN'S Groovy Pirate Ghost Mystery. Seeing Cartman actually be nice to his friends really does make for a freaky Halloween special. That and seeing how Sharon becomes a hella psycho when she thinks Stan's a murderer, hiding hella dead bodies for him, and seeing grief-stricken, disheveled Carol McCormick pumping Stan for information. This episode is hella scary. I think what I mostly like about this episode, though, is the evil alternate dimension twins. It just makes hella sense that Cartman's evil alternate dimension counterpart would be a decent human being as opposed to whatever Cartman is. I also like the line about evil alternate dimension chef being a mean, skinny white insurance salesman. I guess if there's one thing I have to have a gripe with in this episode, it's kind of Aunt Flo. I mean, her being in this episode is fine, but the shtick about how she's so great to Shelly and Sharon, yet makes life so hard for Stan and Randy is a little on the nose and lame. Maybe it's just me. Although I gotta admit, I love the scene where Aunt Flo catches Sharon after she buries the dead body. That line about it being just like when she was 12 adds this whole dark mystery around Sharon that I feel like the show needs to explain one of these days. I'm really almost tempted to say she's out of character in this episode, but pre-movie Sharon Marsh, they really didn't nail down her personality. She's kind of all over the place. And you know what? Just like Randy, I'd love to know why she took Bra Brady's pants off after she captured him. If you ask me, it's hella weird.
Stop saying hella!
Alright, there's not a whole lot more to say about this one anyway. As simple as it is, it's just a decent Halloween special. Truly, this special clearly had tender loving care put into it, just like Squash-A-Lantern. Coming in at number 6, we got Sons of Witches. I know that Trey Parker said that this is his favorite Halloween special. Please don't take me putting it so far low down on the list as disrespect. I mean, obviously you can tell by how highly I spoke of the last two that I don't think this show has any bad Halloween episodes. And I'm definitely not gonna call the episode with Jack and Crack Witch Week a bad one either. The witch pursuit thing joke is pretty solid too, although I wish they came up with a few more variations on the joke, like witch gathering and shoot 'em up. I don't know why, but I also like the way Randy kind of makes himself the leader of the witches. I love how he insists that the witches can't turn the witch pursuit thing onto each other and then immediately tries to sell Steven out. I do gotta say I'm a little bummed we don't get to see more from the other dads. I mean, sure, they're all scattered throughout the episode, but I mean, I wish the others had more influence and, you know, we got to see more of their personalities. It's really kind of just Randy and Chip and a little bit of Steven and then Garrison when he shows up at the end. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention the scariest part of all in this episode. 2017 US political satire. So, yeah, that kind of dates the episode. Although I do have to admit this is my favorite appearance of President Garrison ever in this whole show. And I guess I also have to mention the Heidi and Cartman aspect of the episode. Luckily the show keeps the stuff between them brief, so I can as well with my summary. Pretty much Heidi takes too long getting ready and makes Cartman miss a stupid pumpkin patch, so that makes him hate her. While the guys at school are worrying about a witch going around snatching up kids, Cartman thinks that they're devising a plan to get rid of Heidi, which gives him the idea to come up with his own plan to try to get rid of her. It does work, but the day being saved at the end of the episode kind of undoes it. Man, am I the only fan of this show who doesn't find the relationship status between 10-year-olds remotely interesting? I mean, I will give them credit, the joke about Cartman being the bitter, distant husband archetype does make a lot of sense for his character. I just don't find the relationship stuff in South Park works when it's between the kid characters, just because it's always written from the perspective of adults and it just doesn't really match up. If the show has to have these characters dating, I wish they would do it more of the way that they did it in the earlier seasons, but we'll get into that later. Because right now I'd like to talk about things that are dead, namely Blockbuster. Randy Marsh buys it. He buys it in October of 2012. And so on Halloween Day, he forbids Stan to go out trick-or-treating because he says he needs all hands on deck at the store. He somehow managed to convince himself that Halloween's going to be a really good night for business, that everyone would go into Blockbuster to rent spooky movies. That kind of throws a wrench into Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny's plan to go to the costume contest as the Avengers. Luckily, Kyle comes up with the idea to use his iPad to FaceTime Stan into their trick-or-treating session, and also once again restoring their hope of winning the costume contest, which would go on at the Monster Mash, which would be getting on in a flash. Unfortunately, they run into some mean guys in desperate need of some cash. Kind of guys who wouldn't go down from a simple Cartman smash. Okay, I'll stop with the rhyme. I admit, it was trash. Anyway, the robbers get a hold of Stan and catch wind of the Monster Mash. Because yes, Kyle's iPad with Stan on it through FaceTime counts as Stan. I actually love the jokes they squeeze out of this concept. Shit like the robbers scratching the iPad screen as a means to interrogate Stan. And the joke about Stan dying. I love the delivery on that "somebody get me a goddamn charger" line. But my favorite part of all with this episode is watching Randy's descent into madness as nobody comes into the Blockbuster. The part where he looks up to God and goes, "Ha ha ha, I get it, but you're wrong," is probably the most meme-worthy moment in all of the show, and I'm baffled that it hasn't become one yet. And you know, this Halloween, the shoe is on the other foot in the sense that in SPOOKYFISH, Sharon was the crazy one and Randy was trying to reel her in. Now it seems to be the other way around. Honestly though, how over it Sharon is throughout the entirety of this episode pretty much sums up her character, actually. I just love how this special comes together. It's an amalgamation of spooky movie tropes and observations about the advancements of technology, yet it somehow works. If it works, but nobody works as hard as Mr. Mackey does to get rid of the Scoots in the 4th best Halloween episode. I mean, what an unusual pairing this episode's heroes are. Kenny and Mr. Mackey. I say it's welcome with open arms. It sucks to see Kenny get shafted as often as he does in plots, especially seeing as he's been in the show since the very beginning. I'm pretty sure it's the constant muffled voice that does him in. I also gotta say it's significantly less funny seeing Kenny get rejected by all the kids in school rather than just, you know, killed. And I don't mean less funny as in like, oh, that makes this episode bad. I just mean, you know, it's sad to see. Just like Mr. Mackey says in the car towards the end, Kenny's a smart and compassionate kid and everyone kind of forgets about him sometimes, including the show. I love that every kid in school came to the same conclusion Cartman, Stan, and Kyle did. That they all think they're being so original and clever for using the e-scooters for tricks or treats, when really the e-scooters were probably dumped around that time for that very purpose. What I love even more is how all the adults are willing to just shrug it off except for Mr. Mackey, who's the only one who knows from the beginning that the Scoots are nothing but trouble. Between stuff like IntelliLink and Jelly School, Mr. Mackey kinda needs to take his wins where he can this era. And then once all the parents get wind of just how much candy they need to buy to account for the e-scooters, the games are on. At least the funny things like the Stotches becoming desperate for candy, trying to hit up Randy to hide on the farm away from the trick-or-treaters, and then trying to get some of his candy as well. Mr. Mackey literally gets a gun pulled on him over a bag of whatchamacallits. The kids all look great in their costumes, by the way. Everyone decided to dress up like Rugrats this year, all of them wearing little baby rompers. It's cute. I love that Stan, Cartman, and Kyle just have the vague goal of needing to get more candy than everybody else, and that being more important than their own lives or safety or anything. Admittedly, I've never seen the source material this episode's based off of. But you know, it really doesn't matter. The episode is good enough that it holds up on its own, whether or not you know that it's a parody of the birds. In fact, I feel like knowing the source material would only enhance my love for this episode. Unlike this next episode, where all you need to enjoy it is just a little TECRIDY. Now, to the half of you that didn't click off because I put a TECRIDY Farms episode this high up on the list, first of all, thank you. And second of all, let me ask you a question. Who is the most forgotten South Park character? Who's a mainstay that's been in the show from pretty much the very beginning, and yet it seems like they never get any screen time, and even when they do, it seems like they're never relevant to any plots? If your answer is Mr. Adler, you fail. See me after class. Shelly! Shelly Marsh is a character that admittedly is kind of on the rise these last couple of seasons, but you look throughout the show's history, especially the middle years, and you notice, oh wow, they barely use Shelly Marsh as a character. It kind of makes sense. Roles that she would fit into kind of get filled better by other characters. Like, usually when the show needs world-weary kids to mope around about something, they just use the goth kids. When they need somebody to call Randy out for his stupid bullshit, they just use Sharon, or Stan. For whatever reason, Shelly seems to have a real hard time landing roles. Luckily, these Halloween episodes seem to be giving her tons to do. In season 16, she got so mad at Randy for making Stan miss Halloween that she burnt down the Blockbuster, and now there's this episode. Shelly almost feels like a stand-in for the fans of the show who hate TECRIDY Farms. You almost wonder if her marijuana problem is really genuine or if it just stems from it turning Randy into an asshole. Or, well, more of an asshole, I guess. As much as I love watching TECRIDY Farms, I have to admit, if I had to live with that and just deal with Randy's non-stop bullshit, I'd probably come to resent marijuana a little myself. Admittedly, this episode doesn't portray Randy in the worst light it possibly could. I mean, he still comes across as pretty dopey. Even though by this point the show has switched back mostly to the episodic format, it actually helps to watch the previous episodes in the season for context on why Shelly and the whole family hates Randy so much at this point. It's not totally necessary though. By the end of the episode, you kind of get a feel for how much of an asshole Randy's been becoming, putting Shelly down for wanting to read books instead of party at Halloween. Not as much of an asshole as Butters in this episode though, controlling and manipulating that poor mummy. In all honesty though, portraying a mummy's curse as a toxic marriage is a pretty interesting concept, I have to admit. What is with these Halloween specials and toxic relationships? Almost makes me want to, like, go to South Park Studios and bring Trey some, like, hot cocoa or something. You know what? Fuck it. Let's rise some rabbles in the comments. Who do you think is at fault here in this mummy's curse in this episode? I personally say it falls on archaeologist Butters for not listening to the old farmer. Though I do also think it's a little fair to say that the mummy blew the whole Fitbit thing a little out of proportion. Okay. But at the end of the day, we can see that the mummy really cared for Butters and wanted what was best for him. Having to see them both go their separate ways is heartbreaking, but hopefully it leads to a better chapter for both of them. Now we move on to the episode about the mummy's best friend, the zombie. Oh, I'm being informed that this episode is not about a zombie invasion, but it's actually about a pink-eye outbreak. Huh. See, after a freak accident where a Russian space station crashes into Kenny ends up at the morgue where a haunted bottle of Worcestershire sauce ends up in his embalming fluid container. I'm telling you, that bottle is haunted. How the fuck does it move on its own? Anyway, the Worcestershire sauce gives Kenny pink eye, and then Kenny goes around spreading it to all of South Park. While that's going on, Stan, Kyle, and Cartman get ready for the costume contest. What's cool is that they go through a few costumes. Kyle's first costume is Chewbacca, which, you know, leads to the joke where everyone else was Chewbacca. Then he was the whole solar system, which, as much as I have to admire the effort that had to go into that outfit, come on, that's like got to be the lamest costume ever. I'd argue it's even worse than Stan's Howdy Doody costume. After the costume contest, he shows up dressed as Dracula, so... And then there's Cartman showing up dressed as Adolf Hitler in typical Cartman fashion. I love how he somehow got Leanne to make it for him. Principal Victoria does see it, however, and she's less than enthused, so she makes him into a scary ghost. Cartman may object, but I think his scary ghost costume is really spooky. I mean, look how badly it terrifies poor Chef. And then over here we got Stan dressed as Pippi Longstockings. I said earlier that I like how early South Park handled the relationships between characters like Stan and Wendy better than current South Park, and this episode is a perfect example of why. Here the conflict between them is just they were supposed to go wearing matching costumes. Stan was supposed to go as Raggedy Andy, Wendy as Raggedy Ann. She ditched him and went as Chewbacca instead. We don't always have to have Wendy bitching at Stan and Stan being flaky towards Wendy. I think it's more fun to watch two dumb kids who think they're in love rather than having these kids be middle-aged married couples watching Grey's Anatomy. Not saying they all have to be simple conflicts with simple resolutions either. I just, it's nice to see more of a mix. I wish they'd bring back this kind of relationship into the show. Scott Malkinson and Sophie look like they might be a couple akin to this, so we'll see with them. Anyway, back to Pink Eye, the jokes are just solid all around. The bit about Cartman's mom being on the cover of Crack Whore magazine is absolutely classic. We get a peek into just one of Officer Barbrady and Mayor Daniel's mini love affairs. And just so they can say they threw in something scary for this episode, they gave us the living dead Tina Yothers coming to South Park. I don't know if it's a controversial opinion to put this episode above SPOOKYFISH and KORN'S Groovy Pirate Ghost Mystery. Frankly, I don't care. I just like this episode a whole lot better than those two. Season 1 might not be held in all that high of regard, but this is one case where you can't beat the classics. Unless, of course, we're talking about Hell on Earth 2006. Let me give you the elevator pitch to the world's greatest concept for a Halloween special, okay? Satan is throwing a super sweet 16,000 party. Not good enough for you? Okay, what about a Candyman, but instead of Candyman, it's the rapper Biggie Smalls? And you know what? I know exactly what you're thinking. Alright, the only way I can see those two concepts working together, if they did the Three Stooges, but instead of Larry, Curly, and Moe, it's Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and John Wayne Gacy. And in that case, I have good news for you, that's exactly what this episode is. And there's also the little bit about the Vatican Church trying to get into the Hell on Earth party. I don't know about you, but this is exactly what I love about South Park. They find ways to take the most done-to-death and boring TV and movie tropes, and infuse them with a mixture of current events, recognizable characters, and fart jokes. This was the first Halloween special the show had done in years since 1999, and they 100% knocked it out of the park. Seeing dead celebrities and historical figures living it up at the Hell on Earth party. Especially the joke about Satan mistaking Steve Irwin for a guy dressed up as Steve Irwin just a little while after Steve Irwin had died. But then even after he finds out it's the real Steve Irwin, still throwing him out anyway because no costume. Or how throughout the whole party, Satan's acting like a spoiled 16-year-old valley girl. Or how about the part of the video where I just listed all the jokes from the episode? Wasn't that fun to watch? Seriously though, that's how good this episode is that I almost don't know how to spend my time talking about it without just gushing over how funny it is. I love how the Biggie Smalls plotline starts with Butters summoning him, and then that gets the boys to do it, and then Randy hears about them doing it, and then he tries it. Poor Biggie just can't catch a break this episode. Luckily Butters has his back though. I fucking love the fake out with the partygoers in the bathroom. But my most favoritist part of this episode of all has got to be the three murderers. I didn't even grow up on the Three Stooges. I'm a Laurel and Hardy kind of a girl myself. But seeing Gacy, Dahmer, and Bundy all louse up the delivery of the Ferrari cake is hysterical. Love that they can't stop themselves from murdering, even when they know it's going to cost them their safety when they get back to hell. And then their attempt at trying to make another one is just great. And things even have a happy ending with Satan finally having a change of heart and realizing that the party should have been for his guests and not for himself. I myself am going through a very similar change of heart. I understand that I've now gone 3 months without uploading. Not good, I should be making these videos for you, not for me. Sorry uploads have been pretty slow for the past while. The South Park Season 5 retrospective is coming very soon. Gonna be another South Park video about Stan and Kyle a little bit further down the line, and then some secret projects that I can't talk about yet. Sorry I didn't really have a whole lot of time to go thoroughly into each episode individually here. That's the nature with these ranked videos. But anyway, what did you think of my list? What egregious errors have I made with the placements of some of the episodes in this list? Or do you think I'm onto something? Let me know down in the comments below. That's it for me for this video. Everyone have a safe Halloween and hasta la-